Welcome everybody to another episode of Tallybook Troubleshooting, brought to you by Arc Energy. We process your energy. I'm your host, Keith Stelter, bringing you one Tallybook story at a time, demonstrating the ingenuity of the oil field, demonstrating the types of people in it, getting to know people by the problems they faced, the steps they took to get to the solution, and hopefully winning a little bit of goodwill along the way. Excited about my guest today. A little bit of a fanboy from my perspective. Former Top Gun pilot turned now COO, owner of Fantail Consulting, John Minyard. Correct?
Yes,
Did I get that right?
Very good. Yes,
Excellent. I was a little bit nervous there, sir. This show basically demonstrates some issues. I'm sure as a guy, in the industries you've been in, what do you want to talk about today? What was the problem you were facing, and where did you go with it?
So, Keith, first let me thank you for having me on your show. It's wonderful to be here and in a great location here in Midland, Texas. So, I was actually born and raised out here in Kermit, Texas. My father and grandfather were in the oil field. That's where I grew up. At a young age, I couldn't find my way, and I joined the military. And 30 years, later, after my military service, I found myself, what's next? And I guess I was drawn back into the oil and gas business. So I've always been around it, but I didn't always understand, all the ins and outs of oil and gas and all the different dynamics associated with just getting oil out of the ground.
And so, as a guy who started out somewhere else, but growing up around it, did you encounter a lot of the stigmas or the misunderstanding of why some people absolutely don't like the oil field?
I did, but I think a lot of it is just a lack of understanding. It truly is a lack of understanding. So after I retired from the military in 2013, like I said, I was drawn into a consulting job, and the first place I landed was in oil and gas. And as I'm sitting on my first drilling rig in Pennsylvania, I'm looking around at the young men and women that I'm working with and looking at the big rig and going, what am I got myself into? And I quickly realized it's really the same as the military. We have a diverse background of people from all over the country, different educational levels, working in a very hazardous environment, all for one purpose, to build a team and to do the job efficiently and right for the betterment of society. And that's really what kept me in the oil and gas and really drew me to it. So as I travel around, I try to educate people that, and I tell the oil and gas people, and I'll tell anybody that listens to me, is the people that work in this industry are the 1%ers. And people go, well, what do you mean? I said, only about 1% to 2% of the people will ever go into the oil and gas business. But you should thank them every day, because I don't have to think about turning the light on. I don't have to think about where am I going to fill up my gas tank. I just walk up and I turn it on.
Or your coats, your shirts, the clothes, plastics. There's so many things. It's way more than just gasoline at the pump.
Yep. Right? And those individuals that work very similar to the military, away from their families, away from missing significant events, and they're all to do something with a purpose, just draws me back in, and I'm just so proud to be part of the organization.
And myself as well. There's been times where people ask, Keith, why do you stay in the industry? And to me, it's always been the people. So that's why this tiny little show, for whatever the reach it has, the idea has been that we're more than just these rednecks that maybe people get the wrong impression of.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Once again, thank you for being on. So it's about stories. What was the issue today that you were facing?
So I think what I really started to see is in 2020, as we went into the restrictions and the isolations, was how do you deal with a workforce that's remote? And when you look at the oil and gas industry, again, a lot of similarities to the military. Well, we work in a very remote environment. We have our headquarters in one location and all our forces in a different location. And what I know that I can help bring to this industry is how do you manage and deal with those remote workforces? And one of the significant events where I know it kind of worked was in 2011, when the earthquake and tsunami hit Japan. Devastating event for those people over there. Well, we had a lot of military and Americans and foreign nationals over in Japan, and at the time I was stationed in Hawaii at the U.S. Pacific Fleet, which was responsible for Japan. So we sent our task force and all our rescue personnel over there. But that was such a significant event with the nuclear accident, and it became a worldwide event.
Yeah, I remember watching, on TV, wondering how are they going to deal with all
How
of
they're
this?
going to deal with it. Well, and then it became a national story, and you're having to deal with the administration at the time, President Obama's administration. How are they dealing with it? And it was just so many different agencies that were involved with that. But it's all kind of remote, right? We're doing video teleconferences, and it was just a very impactful event for me to learn how you can manage these type of events. You don't get it right all the time, but for the better of the people on the mission, you can fight through some of those challenges. And I think that's what we're facing today in the oil and gas.
I think that's a really great example. Like, you basically were facing, it wasn't so much because of a lockdown, it was, an emergency on another part of the world, and here you got to do the coordinating, right?
Yeah, and I think that happens to people in the oil and gas all the time. They're out in a remote location over in the Delaware, and something significant happens on that rig. Well, the supervisor's potentially not right there on location. They're maybe back in Houston or some other remote location. And how do you manage that challenging situation? Maybe it's a well control event or something like that. How do you manage it?
Have you seen the importance then of connectivity, like data transfer, that kind of stuff, the importance of that just skyrocket because of that? Because if you can be connected, or the better that you are, the more you're able to interact with people.
I think it's a blessing and it's a deterrent at the same time. I think that we get too wrapped around technology sometimes that it becomes a hindrance.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, I think just Wi-Fi in general. If you look at the reports and all the administrative type of work and the amount of data that's passing back and forth on a drilling location or a frac site, they're talking about remote drilling and the remote geology type things. Well, if that technology goes down, which it does, it happens all the time, especially in some of these remote areas, what do the individuals on location do? Do they have the tools? Do they have the skill set to manage the situation? Because you can't just shut down, right?
And as a guy who comes from a wireline background, a big push has been, instead of sending the wireline engineer out to location, he's just going to stay back at a central hub, hook up to the truck. The operator's going to hook this thing up, and he's going to run it remotely. Well, like you said, what happens when the internet goes down? Who runs that? Or who troubleshoots it, right? And
absolutely.
So, it might save $1 or $2 here. That one guy could run 2 or 3 sites, but when the one site goes down, man, that's very impactful.
And all my experiences, in the military and now, I always fall back on, I call it, something very simple, but it's a low-tech option. What's the lowest tech option you can live with? Because again, technology is exciting. Sometimes it's easy, and it's just exciting to see the amount of information that can flow. But if I cut that off from you, what are you going to do? And so it's just
you're going to be in trouble, definitely.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you coming on, talking to me, and I hope we get to do this again. Hopefully, maybe you'll come on one of the live events and speak a little bit more. And I'd be doing myself a little bit of disservice if I didn't ask, as a guy who grew up in the 80s. And I've seen your profile. If you don't know John, go to his LinkedIn profile, look him up, look up the company, and former Top Gun instructor, correct?
Correct.
So I watched Top Gun. What did they get right on that movie, and what didn't they get right?
Well, I've been sworn to secrecy, but they didn't get a lot right. I mean, the flying of the jets and some of those scenes were actually realistic. And I actually happened to work for one of the...
Oh, come on. You didn't mention that to me. Now we're going to go over our time here.
Yeah, so a gentleman by the name of Rat Willard I actually worked for him in the Pacific, but he was one of the pilots that was in one of those scenes in the movies and stuff. But, you know, from a promotional event, Top Gun was very significant because a lot of young men and women joined the military and served their country because of that movie. But it was Hollywood. But behind the scenes in the real world in Top Gun, I tell you, I was stationed there for 4 years, and it was one of the most challenging, but most rewarding tours I ever had because of the professionalism and the dedication of the men and women that worked there was second to none.
Did you guys train outside? Like, did Canadian military ever train there or take part in with you guys? Or I swear I read an article one time that they did. How did that, you know, those interactions?
So when I got orders to Top Gun was in 1997, and that was when they had transitioned from San Diego, California, Miramar up to Fallon, Nevada. So in Fallon, Nevada, there's a huge training complex in the desert there. And at the time when Top Gun showed up, there was already a command there that did a lot of training, aviation training and stuff. And that's where we worked with different militaries. So the Canadians, Germans, British would all come in for different training. We had exchange officers and those kind of things.
Did you have a favorite? Favorite country other than America, of course?
I love Canada.
Perfect.
That was
what you were supposed to say. That's
I
where I
love
was
them.
going with it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, I really appreciate you doing this. You know, what else? You know, we kind of touched it a little bit at the beginning, but you know, your family was oil field. You came in, the education of it. What do you think we should do to further, you know, the lack of understanding? What should we be doing that we're not doing?
As far as an industry?
As an industry, yes, to make the people outside the industry who have who aren't understanding where we are, why we do what we do, you know, who have such a negative view of us. What, you know, in your opinion, what do you think we should be doing to address that?
I think as an industry as a whole, the steps that have been made, at least in my brief time in the 8 years, and what I think a lot of people don't understand is the amount of effort and energy that the oil and gas industry puts into the environment. You know, everybody says, "Oh, you're taking oil out, or you're dirty, you're harming the environment." My experience is the complete opposite. I think as an industry, you go above and beyond to protect the environment. Yes, it's dirty work, but that doesn't mean it's dangerous or that it's when I say dirty work, it doesn't mean that it's harming the environment. When you look at landfills and those kind of things. So I think as an industry, what I would recommend doing is quit trying to defend what you're doing and promote what you're doing. We talked briefly about it. All the products that come out of the oil and gas and all the good that the industry has done for the world should be promoted.
The access to
Every
cheap
day.
energy has
Everything.
helped so many people, especially here in the United States. It's why it's the powerhouse it is. You know,
The clothes we wear on our back, the fact that we're talking on an iPhone that is made out of petroleum products. I mean, people just don't, again, it's part of the education. They don't understand all the good that oil and gas is. Unfortunately, with our media and stuff, they hear about the negative, the bad thing, the condos or those, you know, unfortunate incidents. That's what makes the news because it's sensational, right? But how many thousands of hours and wells have been drilled safely and efficiently?
Yeah, definitely. It's not a perfect industry by any means. And, you know, we got to work together to come when screw-ups do happen to try and, you know,
That's right.
to fix them and do better the next time.
And I think as an industry, you guys do a phenomenal job of that. So there's areas you can work on, just like any industry, but there's enough good people out here that can fix that.
Once again, John, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, sir. Enjoyed it.
Leave you with that's how you troubleshoot.